When it comes to HMOs, it can be a super profitable strategy. However, many people get this wrong. They don't make the profits they'd expect to make. They even complain about the market might be saturated right now. However, is that actually the case? In this video, I want to show you where the opportunities to create profit now, this year, next year as well going forward, and also what the threats are in this particular sector, because there definitely are some challenges, some threats that you need to be aware of. Hey, if you're watching this video for the first time, my name is Saj Hussain, and on this channel I use my 19 years property investing experience to ultimately help you get further faster in your own property investing business. The concept of HMO property is really having multiple people that are unrelated to each other living in the same property. So as an owner or the landlord of that property, as an investor, we're generating more income from that property than we would as a single family house. Although this concept has been around for a very long time, it's probably around 2009 and 2010 where there was a lot of interest in this market. In fact, it was 2009 when I set up my first HMO. The reason there was an increase in interest in this type of property from investors and landlords is because in 2008, when the market crashed out, what the strategy of many people were using prior to that to buy property was a no money down strategy, where they were purchasing property, refinancing, essentially with maximum debt. And as it became more difficult to be able to borrow and as lending criteria became very strict, property investors and landlords started looking at alternative ways to make their portfolios perform better. And the idea of having multiple income from one property is what the appeal is. The idea of sharing a house and living together has been around a long time. Previously, they were known as bedsites. Even in the late 80s, when I was at university, showing my age now, at that time, as students, we lived in a shared house, we called it digs, and there was very little regulation at the time. It was only in the Housing Act 2004 that some of the changes started happening. In April 2006, the HMO license was rolled out, and this was the beginning of the current format that we currently follow for HMOs. If more people living in a single house means that you receive more rent as a landlord, then why is it many people have struggled to make this strategy work? And in fact, some people have fallen flat on their face and absolutely failed in this strategy. However, the reality of this is it can look like a super profitable strategy on the surface. However, when you dig a little bit deeper, it's really about how you operate it and who you provide accommodation to that can make or break this type of business. Since 2008, there's been a huge increase in the amount of HMOs that exist and the number of people living in this type of accommodation. And to the point where some people are saying it's saturated, they can't make this work anymore, and they are struggling to make HMOs profitable for them. Why is that? When you create a HMO and take it to the market, essentially you're creating a product that you are then offering to a customer. In our case, that customer is a tenant. And I like to think about these as products because we can then match our product to what the customer's needs might be. And I think this is the biggest mistake that I see many people making. There's a mismatch between the product they create and the expectation they have in the type of people that may want to live in that property. When I first got interested in HMOs, I was told about somebody who had 1,000 tenants and only lived about 20 miles away from where we live. And I was really curious about this person, what they did. So I went along to actually meet them. It was a really nice person. And actually, what I discovered, they were servicing a marketplace that really scared me to death. Meaning they were dealing with problematic tenants at the entry level of the marketplace. And what they would do is constantly be on the phone trying to deal with problems, and they'd build quite a big team. And essentially, he was in the business of dealing and managing with these problems in order to make a profitable portfolio. Now, the person I'm talking about is 𝗵𝗲𝗶. He's gone on to become a really good friend. And we did a podcast with Jim, and we'll link that up here for you so you can watch that afterwards. Now, the thing is, at that time when I was learning about HMOs, what had really put me off was the amount of headache and hassle that I might have to deal with. But also, now when we look at it, Jim has actually downsized his portfolio quite substantially, but there are many other types of markets as well. So for example, earlier I mentioned when I was at university, we were living in a HMO, and Jim was focusing at this time on people that were unemployed, that were on benefits, and maybe some people that had some challenging personalities as well. Then there's other kind of categories, like for example, what we call as blue collar, where somebody might be in manual work or semi-skilled work, or white collar, where they might be working at a desk. In the early days, when we used to think about HMOs, we had this vision about people living together that were really kind of friendly, happy, enjoy sharing a house together. And Friends, the sitcom, would come to mind because it was a hit TV show at that particular time. And so when we started thinking about HMOs, my idea was we really want to just create nice spaces for nice tenants that are going to give us an easy life. That's ultimately what we want because we want to make more profit from these. But when I started going around speaking to agents about the idea of creating shared houses, many were resistant against it because it was still kind of a newish concept. Most HMOs that existed at the time were student HMOs, and there's very little other sectors. So over the years, this has completely changed. There's a huge number of HMOs servicing many, many different sectors now. When it comes to our own HMOs, we go through an insane amount of detail in terms of organizing, planning these to get these exactly right, to create a cookie cutter approach so we can repeat the process again and again. And if you've seen any of our HMOs before, you know we go through enormous amount of effort to make them absolutely stunning to get the best possible rents. The overall thing we've broken down into about 49 steps. If you'd like a free copy of those 49 steps, exactly how we do that, the good news is you can grab that right now. There's a link on the screen now and also in the description for you to grab that. Go ahead, do that now, go and grab it. The key learning and thing that's made the biggest difference to us is understanding this idea about the product needs to fit the needs of the customer that's going to be taking on that product. So over the years, if you've seen any of our videos before, you'll see what we tend to focus on is the high end of the market, or what we call the premium end, where we create really good quality accommodation and look for those tenants who can afford to pay that kind of rent. For example, if we have a HMO near a hospital, it may be the doctors that we are servicing who are working in that location who can afford to pay those kind of rents. So we're trying to create a premium product. If you like, in every market, there's a premium product and there's always some demand for it. So for instance, in cars, you'll have, for example, like a Rolls Royce is a premium product, but we don't see these cars around all the time because there's a few customers that can afford those and want that type of product. And not everybody necessarily wants that type of product anyway. This is the niche that we carved out for ourselves. However, there are many other aspects of the market as well, so we don't solely concentrate on that. We also have what we call traditional white collar and blue collar as well. So there's a little bit of a range, but it tends to be working people. Essentially, that's our core market. Now, the reason so many people are complaining about saturation and failing and struggling to make the HMOs work is essentially because they're not set up correctly. Firstly, what they might do is they'll create a HMO for, let's say, professional tenants. They'll make it really nice, but it'll be in a location where those type of tenants don't necessarily want to live. There's been many a times where people have contacted me, they've set up a HMO in Birmingham, and they've reached out to me and say, hey, we've set up this really stunning looking HMO. We understand you also manage HMOs. Can you help us with this particular property? I say, absolutely, send me the details. And when they send me the details, I look at that and I thought, you're never going to be able to achieve those type of rents or attract those type of tenants in that particular location because they've misunderstood the product customer match. So for example, if you're looking for some really nice accommodation to rent in your town or city that you live in right now, you'll know where there's parts of that city that you probably don't want to really live in as well, and there's really nice parts that you'd like to be in. And the same way, this applies to many towns and cities across the country as well. There are areas that people aspire to get out of, and there are areas that people aspire to get into. So you need to think about when you are creating a product like this, if you create a super stunning, amazing product in a location which was cheap to buy, but it's somewhere where people aspire to get out of, then you're really going to struggle to be able to get the premium tenants. And what happens with properties like that, they stay on the market overpriced, or they struggle to get them let and the voids are really high, or when they do rent them, they don't achieve the rents they particularly want. The other big mistake that people make is not understanding the operating costs when it comes to running HMOs. So for example, in our HMOs, we tend to cover all the utilities and all the bills. For example, gas, electric, water, council tax, TV license, cleaners, gardeners, internet. All of this is included within the rent that they pay, meaning that they have just one fee to pay and there isn't any other costs for that particular tenant. And that can look really appealing from a tenant point of view, but from a cost management point of view from our side, we need to consider all of these things. Now, when it comes to gas and electric, these are variable costs, meaning they will change depending on how much is being used in the property. But other things such as, for example, a TV license or council tax or internet access, these tend to be fixed and there isn't much change on those things. Or if you look at social housing, where the rent is being paid by the government using some form of benefits, or it might be a contribution they're making to top up the rent each week as well as the rent they're able to claim on benefits. When you have costs like this, sometimes people think about, well, I just have more bedrooms, that means I've got more profit, then it isn't so much of an issue. But also we've got to think about the practicalities. So for example, we manage a 14-bedroom HMO on behalf of somebody else. It's a professional let, but we really struggle to make that one work really well. What we find is professionals don't necessarily want to live with that number of people. It can feel more like a hostel than a home. So what we want to do is focus on what that balance is between where the number of people living in the house is not so high that people don't enjoy living there, but also makes it profitable as well. The sweet spot for us is when we take into consideration the operational costs and also the licensing and planning, 6 or 7 people is what works really well for us. And I've done a video previously on the channel where I talk about licensing and planning and the importance of those things, and I'll link that up here for you to watch that afterwards. Now, when we think about the operating costs and we have a crude calculation to be able to work out what works, if for example we take a 4-bedroom house, the first rent that you receive from the first tenant will probably cover the cost of your mortgage or your rent if it's a rent-to-rent type property. The second and third rents that you receive will probably cover your operating costs, your gas, electric, water, council tax, TV license, cleaners, gardens, internet, all these things that you've got to pay for, as well as management, maintenance, voids as well, that you need to factor in. So then your fourth room is really where the profit is. So if you've got, for example, a 3-bedroom HMO, as sometimes people talk to me about, and I think I can't understand how you'd make something like that work because the numbers are so tight. Your headline income might be higher, but because of your costs, it really doesn't make any sense. And when you take in voids into consideration as well, when somebody, for example, has moved out and you've got somebody else moving in, especially when you're in the HMOs, you have a transient community, people don't generally stay there for a long period of time, maybe 6 months, a year, and they move around. So you've constantly got this change of people in the property. When you take all those things into consideration, it's really difficult to make money from smaller HMOs for the 3, 4 and 5-bedroom ones. That's why the 6 and 7 is the number that works really well for us. And the real reason for that is, as you've covered your base costs in the first 3 rents, when you get to 4, 5, 6, they tend to be profit and they all go down to the bottom line. Ultimately, HMOs are super profitable only if they're done right. And I want to talk about some of the threats, because there are threats that we're facing within this sector in a few moments. But one of the best ways to learn and meet other people on the same mission as you is to attend events like networking events. And we have an amazing event that we run every month. The Impact Network is a monthly event that we hold at our Birmingham office.
Brilliant event.
Mind-blowing.
Absolutely awesome.
Really knowledgeable. Glad I came. It's been great.
Loved every minute.
The idea being to help accelerate growth for property and business entrepreneurs. We got like-minded people together to learn and network from each other, and also some fantastic speakers. For example, we've had sessions today on scaling and growing your business, having the right teams around you, how to create a passive house in terms of investment, and also using AI to create content. This is not AI, this is a real me, and I look forward to seeing you at the next event. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, because there are challenges that we're facing that some people really aren't talking about. There are potential problems and risks that we are facing, but not just in HMOs. So the renters reform is going to impact how we perform as landlords, how we run these businesses, and ultimately it's shifting more and more in the favor of the tenants in terms of tenants' rights. Now, I think tenants' rights are important, and I think it's super important. There's also some balance, which I feel right now we are lacking. There isn't really fairness in the way this model works and the market works. But hey, it is what it is. But if we've got a problematic tenant or a challenge with a tenant, that's really the only time we really want somebody to leave a property. If somebody's in the property, they're happy, they are getting on with the other people in the house, there's no antisocial behavior, they pay the rent on time, why would we ask them to leave? There's absolutely no reason for them to do that. Occasionally, and it doesn't happen very often, we've been forced to increase our rents with market conditions, especially when we had the huge spike in utility prices going up. But generally speaking, when they're doing the property, they're quite happy, there's no issue whatsoever. The only time we need somebody to leave is when there's a problem. But we should have a means to be able to do that, and right now it's not very easy to do that, and it's becoming more and more difficult. So with that in mind, we need to understand who our customers are, who are we servicing, and how that relationship is going to work going forward. Now, with this in mind, we are also making some changes in our business. Now, for many, many years, about 16 years in fact, we're focused purely on what I've called blue collar and white collar tenants. However, we are about to embark on a journey which we considered a few years ago, which we just felt wasn't the right time at that time for us. We are now also going to be looking at social housing, because I think it's a really interesting market now that's matured, and those operators that run their businesses well, serve the needs of the clients really well, potentially there could be a really good opportunity there for us. And that's something new that we'll be focusing on. I'll be sharing some more videos around that. So make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of this content as when we're sharing it, because we'll be sharing some more information soon. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button, and whilst you're at it, give me a quick like as well, and in the comments let us know what you see as the opportunities or the threats in the HMO market. At the end of the day, we become landlords because we want to create accommodation that provides nice homes for nice people, and also builds a business for us and profitable for us, and allows us to be able to build a business for us and our family as well. But there are external factors that are constantly bombarding us, which impact how we can perform as a business as well. So the constant changes in the law and regulation is impacting how we perform, also adds to the operating costs, and many of the changes that happen that the government make, which making it more difficult for landlords, ultimately the cost of this trickles down to the tenant, because just like any business, there's only so much cost that you can absorb. And if they make it so difficult, there might be more and more people leaving the market. But at the same time, I believe that creates an opportunity, because without that point in the marketplace where there's a change happening, some people leave and new entrants come into the market as well. So this is a fantastic time, if you're not already in this business, to think about how can you create these amazing homes that services entry level of the market. Because let's face it, this sector is not going away. When you look at the average salary of somebody's 27,000, 30,000 pounds range, and then you look at the average value of a property in the UK, again about 270 to 300,000 pounds, these figures are 10 times and making it so unaffordable to be able to get onto the property ladder. Couple that with the idea of people traveling more, they want to work away from their workplace, they don't necessarily want to be somewhere where they're stuck to a particular location. It just means people are moving more as well. So then this entry level of the market will always be there. It's thinking about who you want to create products for, how you want to service them, do that to the best of your ability. It can be an amazing, fulfilling and rewarding business. Something that I get asked a lot is, how do we get commercial valuation on property? Meaning, how can you get a value of a property that's based on its income and that massively increases the value from that as a bog standard house? And how is it that it can be worth so much more than the house on the left or the right? Well, there's a technique that we use in order to do that, and I've got a video lined up just over here for you that explains exactly how this concept works. So go ahead, watch that now, and I look forward to seeing you on that video.